talk about the things that make a business more or less valuable, there's literally dozens of things that we can point to that influence value, both positively and negatively. So much so that it can actually become quite frustrating if we're trying to evaluate our business to see how we can optimize its value. So rather than provide a presentation listing off dozens upon dozens of different factors that influence your value, I thought I would try and take a step back and look at the three major influencers of value. It's my belief that all the little individual things that influence value actually fall into one of these three categories. And so if we look at our businesses just through these three categories, we can get a much better sense for where our business stands and where we can improve the value of our businesses. What are these three influencers of value? Well, they're risk, growth prospects, and transferability. Of these three influencers, risk is by far the most influential. And the reason for this is pretty straightforward. Buyers simply have a lot to lose if the acquisition they make fails in any way. You see, with your business, if the business fails, it would be a bad thing. You would lose your income and you would lose the value of the asset that you owned. For a buyer, not only do they lose all of that, but they also lose their original investment, or at least part of it, whatever hasn't been paid back yet. And this fear gets amplified when we consider how a buyer acquires a business, or how much they actually acquire a business for. Typically, a buyer is going to pay a multiple of your annual earnings in order to acquire your business. For example, if your business earns $100,000 per year, a buyer might pay $300,000, or a multiple of three times. This means that if everything remains equal, it'll take the buyer about 3 years to earn back their original investment. Of course, if something bad happens to the business, that 3 years can actually stretch out to 4, 5, or even longer if they recover any of their investment as well. This is why risk has become such an important factor for buyers to consider. They have to make sure that their investment is protected and that they earn back at least their original investment, if not more. A lot of times, people who are selling their business can get offended at a buyer who is looking at every aspect of their business in a negative way. It sometimes feels as if a buyer only wants to find the bad areas and doesn't focus on any of the good things that you've built. Just understand that this is a normal part of any buyer's normal due diligence. So, how does risk actually influence the value of a business? Well, risk tends to be more of a negative influencer than it does a positive influencer. What this means is that a high risk business is going to feel a lot of downward pressure on the value of their business. On the other hand, a low risk business doesn't really experience that much upward pressure on the price of their business unless the nature of it being low risk is such that it practically guarantees the future of the business in some way. This, of course, goes back to the reason that risk is such a major influencer. A buyer needs to make sure that they get back their original investment from the business, whether that be through selling the business at some point in the future, but more ideally, just through the profits that the business makes in the natural course of business. And this leads us to our second influencer, the growth prospects of a business. Growth prospects are a strong influencer of value for much of the same reason that risk is such a strong influencer of value. A buyer wants to make sure that they get paid back for their original investment, but the second part of this is that they want to get paid back as quickly as possible. A business that grows rapidly for its new owner pays its owner back faster than a business that either shrinks or stays the same. Let's look back at our example of a business that generates $100,000 per year in earnings, and let's assume that the buyer had paid $300,000 for that business. Under normal conditions, it would take the buyer 3 years to earn back their original investment. But now let's assume for a moment that the buyer increases the earnings to $150,000 per year as opposed to $100,000 per year. Now the buyer is going to get paid back within 2 years as opposed to three. This is an improvement of 33%, a much faster payback period. But there are other benefits as well to a business growing under its new owner. Not only does it shrink the payback period for the owner, but it also provides a higher return on investment and also increases the value of the business itself. It's for these reasons that buyers really care about the growth prospects of a business. But when we talk about growth prospects, we really have to be careful to not confuse growth prospects with a generic term potential. It may sound a little odd to try and make a distinction between potential and growth prospects because they sound like the same thing. In reality, they probably are. But within the industry, people who talk about potential are often not taken seriously. This is because people who talk about potential often don't have anything else to talk about. They can only talk about what the business could be in the future rather than what it has actually done. In this regard, I want to make the distinction between growth prospects and potential. Growth prospects aren't about what the business could do without any evidence of what it has done, but rather growth prospects are an indication of where the business should go based off what it actually has done in the past. The most common indicator of future growth prospects is past growth. A business that's grown consistently 10 to 15% year over year for the past 5 years has a pretty good chance of continuing growth down the road, unless there's some sort of indication that that growth has now peaked. But there can be other real indicators of growth, such as untapped areas of revenue, extremely low conversion rates that have never been optimized, and so forth. The third key influencer value is transferability. In reality, this could probably fall under the risk category, but it's such a broad category and so important that I wanted to break it out into its own individual category. Transferability is just the degree to which a business can be transferred over to a new owner and how easy that transition should actually take. In other words, a person who's going to be buying your business might ask themselves, can I run this business? How will it operate underneath my ownership? Will it look the same? Will it feel the same? Will it perform as well as it does under its current owner? Where you can run into problems with transferability is when the business is too closely tied to your own personality or your own personal abilities. An extreme example of this would be a person who does freelance web design. They're the ones who do the actual designs and have the talent and the skills and the knowledge to do web design, and not just anybody can take that over. In addition, somebody who does freelance web design usually has their own set of styles which appeal to their customers. But transferability doesn't have to just limit itself to the talent that the owner brings to the business. Any aspect of your business that represents a hurdle that a buyer will have to overcome in order to take over your business could be an issue of transferability. In addition, you also have to consider the various accounts that a buyer is going to have to set up and own in order to properly run your business. For example, if you work with a specific vendor, they may want to have that same account as you do. And if that vendor has special restrictions, they may not qualify for the same terms that you get with that vendor. Transferability can actually be a very broad ranging influencer of value. As you might expect, just like risk, transferability tends to be more of a negative influencer than a positive influencer. In other words, a business that has a very low level of transferability, or in other words, is very difficult to transfer, is going to have a lot of downward pressure put on the price. And this is really just simple economics, supply and demand. If there are fewer buyers that actually qualify to buy your business, there will be fewer people that have demand for it. And so the price is going to go down for your business as opposed to up. When we take a step back and consider these three general influencers of value, we really get a much better picture of what's actually influencing the value of your business. While we could make a very detailed list of all the individual factors that could actually influence the value of your business, what we would find is that it would be pretty easy to assign each of those factors into one of these three broad categories. So as you make your plans to maximize the value of your online business, consider these three general influencers of value. Do what you can to reduce the risk of the business. Make sure that you keep a good track record of growth and keep open very good growth prospects for a new buyer. And finally, make sure your business transfers easily over to a new buyer. If you do these three things, you'll be well on your way to having a business that's been optimized for the marketplace and that buyers will absolutely love. For more tips like these as to how to increase the value of your business, visit our blog at quietlightbrokerage.com/blog. And if you'd like us to give you a free valuation of your website, visit us at quietlightbrokerage.com/sell.